Welcome back, Dr. Tracy. George has a question for you.
Yeah, Dr. Tracy, in this REM sleep, there's a certain paralysis that is present during that mode, and how do the drugs affect that, and then how does that change things when in a REM waking state, when it's set off on an episode? How does that interact and so forth? How does that work?
Well, they have long believed that it is higher levels of serotonin that overstimulate the brainstem that removes the paralysis that you normally have during sleep. So that allows you to get up and act out whatever you're dreaming. For instance, I had a neighbor that they talked into taking these drugs, and she was only about 16. And I just sat her down and I said, okay, Amber, you have seen me for all these years work to educate about these drugs. You've seen the cases firsthand that I've dealt with. And she watched one neighbor that thought he was a Scottish crown prince for 6 months. So, I mean, if that wasn't enough to wake anybody up as he walked around the neighborhood in his little Scottish kilt, I don't know what would be. But, and the sword on his side. But anyway, I handed her one of my CDs on how to come off of the drug safely. And I said, you keep this with you, and the minute you begin to have these very vivid nightmares that come with these drugs, you call me because we're going to help you come off of this. And I said, because when you get to where you're having these really vivid nightmares, you're right on the brink of being to the point where you can act those out. She said, oh, I'm already doing that. She'd been on Zoloft 3 months. And I said, what? She said, well, just the other night I was dreaming that my cat was crawling all along the very edge of my bed. And she said, I woke up and it was me crawling along the very edge of my bed. That's a REM sleep behavior disorder.
Gosh.
Now, comedian Phil Hartman's wife, guess what screenplay she was writing and working on? Guess what the plot was when she got up in the middle of the night and shot Phil? The plot in her screenplay, which she was probably dreaming about, working on it, was a woman who shot her husband while he slept. The New York City subway bomber, when he blew up the New York subway, he was actually writing a book on the subway. He was so obsessed with the subway, thought it was such an incredible system that it should be named one of the wonders of the world. So his worst nightmare was destroying the subway. In fact, what did he tell everyone when it happened? He said, it couldn't have been me. I fell asleep. Well, he did fall asleep. He just didn't have paralysis during sleep and acted out dreaming.
Doctor, there seems to be a synergy. I have an idea that I call social synergy. And these psychotropic drugs, these very dangerous drugs, acting in conjunction with those other negative, dark ideas, do they not?
Yes, in many ways. I might say that every patient I've ever interviewed says they feel possessed. Even atheists tell me that they feel possessed. So in a way, that may tie in with the energy that you're talking about them feeling. It's that negative energy.
I have a question. What about successful malpractice lawsuits? Are there doctors?
Oh, there's been many of them. Most of them end up with gag orders put on them, though, because they settle generally before they go to court. And then the gag order goes into place, and the people, even though they're awarded so much money, they will not get it if they do not shut up about the case, which should be illegal. That's like buying silence when this is a public safety issue. One case that went to court where there were no gag orders put on, although they did recall a lot of the evidence in that case so that it's not available to the public. But it was a case up in Wyoming. I waited for about 3 years for Jerry Spence to take the case. And when he decided he didn't want to try it, he didn't know enough about the subject, Andy Vickery stepped in from Houston and took it, who's been one of the leading litigants worldwide with these cases.
And that was Andy.
I called Andy and I said, tell me you used my serotonin information in this case. And he said, you'd be so proud of me, because that's exactly what he'd already done. And that's what my book is based on, is the fact that they've told us that serotonin is low in depression and we need to increase it so that people can feel better. In fact, the exact opposite is true. According to the research, serotonin levels are high in depression, not low. They're high in anxiety, high in panic. So when you look at the research, when you increase serotonin, you produce murder and suicide, impulsive murder and suicide. And they've known that for decades. All the research shows it. Well, the expert that the drug company had brought in was one whose research I had referred to quite a bit in my book. So I knew that he knew. And Mr. Vickery got him on the stand, asked him a bunch of questions. They said that he danced around all those questions. So Mr. Vickery said, well, you seem to have problems with yes and no questions, so I'm going to give you a multiple choice. He went to the blackboard and put 2 squares. Next to one square, he wrote Paxil, which was the drug involved in this murder-suicide. Paxil increases the metabolism of serotonin. Next to the other one, he wrote Paxil decreases the metabolism of serotonin. Well, of course, it decreases the metabolism of serotonin. It interferes with the metabolism. That's what a reuptake inhibitor is. It inhibits the reuptake, which means metabolism, so that serotonin will build up. And when it does that, according to his research he'd already testified to, it produces impulsive murder and suicide. This elderly man had taken only 2 pills of Paxil. Got up after that second day, he got up that morning, shot his wife, daughter, baby granddaughter, and then himself. Talk about impulsive murder and suicide. Anyway, of course, he had to admit that, yes, this is what the drug does, and therefore, according to my research, it produces impulsive murder and suicide, just what you saw. And the jury awarded $6.4 million to what was left of the family after that.
From the doctor's malpractice insurance, I'm assuming?
No, from the drug company themselves.
I see. And this was Andy Vickery that is the leading, and he's out of Houston, you said?
Yes.
Well, this is
now mainly doing birth defect cases from these drugs.
Dr. Tracy, we have to take a break at the top of the hour here for news and everything, and then we'll be back for 2 more segments. We certainly appreciate this fine interview this evening and the contributions you've made in the past.
And we'll talk about those SSRI babies.
We'll be right back.
Good.